Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today I want to talk to you about one of my favorite artists literally ever. So talented. And this is, of course, Gino Vannelli. But when we talk about Gino, we also have to talk about his brother, Joe Vannelli, because they were partners on stage, they were partners in songwriting and arranging. They were a great musical collaboration that went on for decades. The music was simply irresistible. Now, Gino and Joe were born to an Italian Canadian family and worked their way to LA by the early 70s. And when they were there, in spite of their talent and in spite of their drive, they didn't find the kind of success that they hoped for. So Gino hatched a plot, if you will, to stand outside of the A&M Records studios, which was on La Brea Avenue. It then became the Jim Henson Studios. Before Herb Alpert took it over, it was the Charlie Chaplin Studios. But anyway, great music and film studio. So they stood outside there in the hopes of running into Herb Alpert, begging the guard to let him see him. But do you have an appointment, sir? That type of thing. So he was standing out there with his guitar case and his brother looking on. And one day he sees Herb Alpert walking out of one of the buildings into where the cars are. And Gino decides to just rush in. And the security guard goes apeshit. Gino himself said that if this were to happen today, he'd probably get shot. But he made it up to Herb Alpert that was very confused by the whole thing, and he handed him a demo tape. And Herb Alpert said, well, actually, no, I think before he handed him the demo tape, he actually took out his guitar and played him something. And Herb Alpert said, let's talk. And sure enough, Gino and Joe got a contract with A&M Records, which was always a more selective record label that put a bit more care into the artists they signed than just the sort of run-of-the-mill, literally, type of record labels. And Gino's first album, which was Powerful People, actually, that was his second album. Crazy Life was his first, but Powerful People was the one that really set the tone for the rest of his career. It was a fantastic album from start to finish. Again, no filler, always a sign of a great album. Joe's arrangements were wonderful. And what's interesting about Gino Vannelli is what genre should you place him in? Well, is he a singer-songwriter? Well, yes, he is, but the arrangements that Joe came up with are nothing like a one-man and an acoustic guitar, maybe quiet string section. No, it was none of that. This was loud jazz rock fusion with loads of layered polyphonic keyboards, the best money could buy in the mid to late 70s. Great aggressive drumming, funky bass playing. This stuff was loud, it was fun, it was hip, it was cheerful. It was music that could really make you tap your toes and put a smile on your face, but harmonically incredibly sophisticated. In terms of the musicality of the artist, really, really high level. Joe, great keyboard player himself, and Gina had a voice that had so much range. The range that he brought to the table was really remarkable. And he was one of these singers that live or in the studio, pitch perfect. He wasn't ever wobbling to find the pitch. He was rock solid, as you really need to be, and that kind of genre that requires so much musical expertise. And they went on to record several other albums together, including The Gist of Gemini. Great album, Pauper in Paradise came next. And then in 1978 came their highest charting album, Brother to Brother, Two Brothers, there you go. And this followed the same format that I think made Powerful People such a great album of, lots of a rock and roll attitude to jazz fusion with great singer-songwriting tendencies. It really had it all. It was an exciting album. If you want to hear what 70s jazz fusion excitement that's based around great songwriting really is, you should definitely check out Brother to Brother. Joe, of course, continues to play keyboards, including piano and synthesizer on all of these albums. And this album also had, as Rick Beato loves reminding his audience, which includes me, the great session guitar player Carlos Rios plays guitar on this album. Now, he's not a household name like others from this era, like sort of Al Di Meola, for instance, or someone huge like John McLaughlin, but he was a really, really busy session player. So even if his name isn't as big as some of the others who were guitar, sort of jazz fusion guitar gods records at this time, you've heard him because he's done so much session work. And the brothers continued to record into the 80s. Nightwalker was released in 1981. The song Living Inside Myself was released as a single. Really, really good song. And they continued to work throughout the 80s, but with less intensity than in the late 70s and early 80s, which was the commercial peak of Gino and Joe Vannelli. Vanelli. What am I saying? You know what I'm talking about. Gino himself is a very spiritual guy, and when you listen to him on interviews, he shows himself to be incredibly thoughtful, very pensive, very meditative, very honest. And I find that the more sincere you are as a person, the more that sincerity shines through in the music. And with Gino and Joe's music, that really, really is the case. He continues to tour to this day. He's still sounding good. He's still looking good. It's going really well, and everyone is happy in a Gino and Joe Vannelli world. I would recommend that if Gino and Joe are coming to your town, I think you really ought to go and see them because it's just a good show with good musicians. And if you haven't heard the songs already, you'll get exposure to some of the best written songs that became these jazz fusion rock jazz arrangements from the mid 70s to the early 80s, which in many ways, I suppose you could say fusion, while invented in the late 60s, it reached its peak in the 70s into the early 80s. And Gino Vannelli really, really captures that, along, of course, with his brother Joe. Like and subscribe. The subscribing is really important, so they tell me. And we will see you next time. Take care.